Good morning, Barry Bryson here. Thank you for joining me for another 5 good minutes with the Word. We're in Mark's Gospel and we're beginning chapter 12. Jesus, after having cleansed the temple and spent the night in Bethany, is back. And he's walking around the temple pavilions, around the grounds of the temple, and he's fending off their questions, or maybe I should say dealing with their questions, in such a way that he calls upon them to answer the questions, their own questions themselves. And today, at the beginning of chapter 12, he's going to tell a parable. There aren't many parables in Mark's gospel, you know. Mark's gospel is mostly action. But this is, I think, the longest parable in Mark's gospel. And it's one of those parables like we find in the Gospel of Luke more than any other source, which is really a short story. But Mark's short stories are about their family stories, their stories about people traveling. This is quite, almost allegorical, but unmistakable in its meaning, which the text lets us know. They knew exactly what he was saying, and they know exactly whom he was talking about. So, let's read chapter 12. I'm going to read verses 1 through 12. He began to speak to them in parables. A man planted a vineyard and put a wall around it and dug a vat under the winepress and built a tower and rented it out to vine growers and went on a journey. And at the harvest time, he sent a slave to the vineyard in order to receive some of the produce of the vineyard from the vine growers. And they took him, and they beat him, and sent him away empty-handed. And again he sent another slave, and they wounded him in the head and treated him shamefully. And he sent another, and that one they killed. And so with many others, beating some, killing others. He had one more to send, a beloved son. So he sent him, last of all, saying, "They will respect my son." But those vine growers said to one another, "This is the heir. Come, let us kill him, and the inheritance will be ours." And they took him and killed him and threw him out of the vineyard. What will the owner of the vineyard do? He will come and destroy the vine growers and will give the vineyard to others. Have you not even read this scripture? The stone which the builders rejected, this became the chief cornerstone. This came about from the Lord, and it is marvelous in our eyes. And they were seeking to seize him, and yet they feared the multitude, for they understood that he had spoken the parable against them. And so they left him and went away. This is a hard parable to read because we know exactly what he's talking about. We know it's absolutely true. And we know that the judgment that is promised actually happened. That in the rebellion, the Jewish rebellion of the 60s, which culminated in the destruction of Jerusalem, the destruction of the temple, the final stand at Masada, Old Testament Judaism was crushed permanently and forever. There are no Mosaic Jews. There aren't. The Mosaic law cannot be kept. God destroyed it with the might of the Roman army. And this is clear. They understood exactly what he was talking about, which means they understood that they were indeed guilty. But like Dostoevsky's Grand Inquisitor, that didn't matter. It didn't matter. What mattered was what they wanted to believe, what they insisted reality ought to be, what the will of God should conform to, and they were not going to budge. And they didn't. And everything that Jesus said in this parable played out exactly as he said it would. To me, the tough part in this story, just as a reader, I just feel so bad for those servants. Who does that? If you know your people are being beaten and killed, why keep sending them there? And why send your son, your beloved son, and yet in asking that question, which I think Jesus intends for us to ask, I think he's, pressing a button that is our moral sensibility, the way Nathan the prophet did with David after he sinned with Bathsheba. A button that causes us to just bristle at the injustice of it all, and then to realize that we are the culprit, that we are the one who is responsible for this all happening and for the death of his beloved son. Well, they're going to divide their forces and come at him from various directions with hot button issues, questions that they are sure will discredit him with the crowd starting next time. Thank you for joining me for another 5 Good Minutes with the Word. I'm Barry Bryson. Next time we'll pick up with verse 13.